rich man pretends to lose his wallet near a beggar, he expects silence, maybe dishonesty, maybe selfishness, but never kindness. Yet the moment billionaire investor Jonathan Reed let that thick leather wallet slip beside the worn-out shoes of Caleb, a homeless beggar sitting quietly beneath a cold November wind, something extraordinary happened, something that would restore humanity itself in the eyes of anyone watching. Jonathan came disguised as an ordinary businessman, testing humanity after losing his own faith in people. But Caleb's first reaction shattered every assumption the rich man held about the world and about himself. Why would a beggar who has nothing choose to do what he did? And why did Jonathan's eyes fill with shame the moment Caleb moved? What past heartbreak led Jonathan to stage this unusual test? And what hidden pain was Caleb carrying that shaped the choice he made? Jonathan Reed stood at the edge of the crowded sidewalk, shoulders tight beneath the fitted gray coat he wore not to impress, but to hide. The afternoon sun threw long shadows across the city's financial district, reflecting off glass buildings he practically owned, yet he felt strangely invisible among the rushing crowd. That was the point. Today he didn't want to be seen as the billionaire who closed $80 million deals before breakfast. Today he wanted to test something deeper, something he had stopped believing in after years of betrayal disguised as loyalty. His therapist had told him, "You don't hate people, Jonathan. You hate disappointment." Maybe she was right. Maybe the world wasn't as selfish as he feared. Or maybe he needed proof, real proof, to believe that goodness wasn't extinct. So he slipped a plain leather wallet into his coat pocket, stuffed with cash he didn't care about losing, and walked toward the old brick corner where a beggar usually sat. He had seen the man before, quiet, humble, never asking, only hoping. There was something different about him, something that didn't match the worn jacket or the cardboard sign. Caleb didn't lift his head when Jonathan approached. His fingers were wrapped around a chipped paper cup with only a few coins inside. His beard looked grown from hardship rather than neglect. But his posture, straight despite exhaustion, hinted that he wasn't broken, not fully. Jonathan paused beside him, pretending to take a phone call as he bent slightly. The wallet slipped from his coat as planned, landing near Caleb's foot. He stepped away, heart pounding harder than it should, as if the truth of humanity itself was about to be revealed in the next breath. Caleb noticed it immediately. Jonathan saw the man's eyes shift toward the wallet, his hand hover for a second, his throat tighten. The world around them moved fast, heels clicking, taxis honking, suits brushing past. But for Jonathan, everything slowed. He studied Caleb's face for greed, for excitement, for hesitation. Instead, Caleb blinked hard, confusion crossing his expression before something gentler replaced it. Concern. He didn't pocket the wallet. He didn't even touch it at first. Instead, he glanced up at Jonathan's retreating figure, then back at the wallet, then at Jonathan again, as though wrestling with a decision much bigger than the object on the ground. Jonathan walked another 10 feet away, staying close enough to watch. A flash of memory hit him, his former business partner smiling warmly as he congratulated Jonathan on a deal, only to siphon funds behind his back. His ex-fiancée crying at the private dinner table, telling him she needed emotional space, while secretly meeting someone else she thought could offer her a life with more luxury. Jonathan had learned the hard way that people could look honest and still betray with practiced ease. He waited for Caleb to prove him right again, but instead, Caleb did something small, yet profound. He slowly reached down, picked up the wallet, and stared at it, not like a man who had found an opportunity, but like someone holding something sacred that didn't belong to him. Then he stood. His stance wavered with hunger and fatigue, but the intention behind it was steady. "Sir, hey, sir," he called, his voice raspy but sincere. Jonathan's chest tightened. He didn't turn yet. He wanted to see how far Caleb would go. Caleb took a few steps forward, the wallet held out in both hands as if afraid to damage it. "Sir, you dropped this." Jonathan turned slowly, masking the surge of emotion rising in him. Caleb approached with cautious respect, almost apologetic for interrupting. "You dropped your wallet," Caleb repeated, offering it with a faint smile that carried both warmth and tiredness. Jonathan took it with a rehearsed surprise. "Oh, wow, thank you. I didn't even notice." Caleb nodded. "Didn't want you to lose it." It looked important. Jonathan studied him closer. Caleb had nothing, no food, no security, no certainty about tomorrow. Yet he didn't hesitate to return something that could have changed his entire week, maybe his entire month. "Most people would have kept it," Jonathan said quietly. Caleb shrugged, the motion small. "Maybe, but it's not mine, and I wouldn't want someone doing that to me." Something inside Jonathan cracked slightly. The simplicity of Caleb's answer held a truth. No motivational book or boardroom philosophy ever could. "Are you hungry?" Jonathan asked before he could stop himself. Caleb hesitated, pride flickering across his face. "I'll be fine." Jonathan forced a smile, but inside he was already spiraling into deeper questions. Why would a beggar refuse help? Why did his honesty feel more genuine than the polished promises of people Jonathan trusted in the past? And why did this moment, this simple return of a wallet, feel like a turning point he didn't fully understand yet? "Thank you," Jonathan said again, but the words carried weight this time. As he walked away, he kept glancing back at Caleb, unsettled by the goodness he'd just witnessed. He came expecting proof of selfishness. Instead, he found something purer, something that made him question every belief he had built around distrust. But he had no idea this small encounter was only the beginning. Caleb's past, Jonathan's hidden wounds, and the unexpected connection forming between them were about to collide in ways neither man was prepared for. Jonathan didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dim glow of his penthouse living room, the same penthouse whose walls had heard more silence than laughter, thinking about Caleb's rough hands holding his wallet with the gentleness of a guardian. It unsettled him. It stirred something he hadn't felt since he was a teenager, before life taught him that trust was a dangerous luxury. He opened the wallet again, staring at the cash inside. Not a single bill moved. Caleb hadn't even peeked. Jonathan let out a long breath, rubbing his temples as he leaned back on the leather sofa that suddenly felt colder. It was strange. A man worth billions should not be losing sleep over a brief encounter with a homeless stranger. Yet Jonathan kept replaying Caleb's voice, the soft uncertainty in it, like a man who had lost more than money could restore. He felt an urge, irrational but persistent, to see him again, not for another test, but because something about Caleb felt unfinished. People like that didn't end up on sidewalks by accident. Life pushed them there. Stories buried them there. Stories people ignored. Jonathan found himself driving back to that block the next morning, long before the office needed him. His assistant Meredith texted him 3 times about a rescheduled board meeting he had practically begged to avoid last week. Normally, he would care. Today, he didn't. Today, the hollow ache inside him demanded a different priority. Caleb was there again, sitting quietly, his posture the same, his paper cup resting beside him. But there was something off. His shoulders looked heavier, his breathing slower. Jonathan parked his car farther away, choosing to approach on foot. People passed Caleb without a second glance, but Jonathan noticed every detail. He saw the way Caleb tapped his thumb against his knee, a nervous habit. He saw how his eyes flicked up whenever someone walked near, not in hope, but in caution. Jonathan cleared his throat gently as he approached. Caleb turned reflexively, recognition softening his features. "Oh, hey, you're the guy from yesterday." Jonathan nodded. "Yeah, thought I'd stop by." Caleb blinked, surprised by the idea that someone like Jonathan would return to a place like this. "You, drop your wallet again?" he joked weakly. Jonathan chuckled. "Not today." Awkward silence followed. Jonathan wasn't used to conversations. Without scripts, without agendas, without strategy. Caleb wasn't used to conversations at all. "You doing okay?" Jonathan finally asked. Caleb hesitated, eyes drifting to the sidewalk. "I'm alive. That's something." Jonathan lowered himself to sit on the curb beside him, ignoring how his clothes might wrinkle. Caleb subtly shifted, unsure whether he was allowed to be comfortable with company. They sat like that for a moment, letting the passing world blur around them. "You didn't take anything from the wallet," Jonathan said, not as an accusation but a confession of admiration. Caleb shrugged again, but this time something in his expression cracked. "I used to tell my students that character is what you do when no one is watching." Jonathan's head snapped toward him. "Students?" A shadow crossed Caleb's face. He swallowed hard, fingers tightening around the paper cup. "Yeah, I used to teach at Lincoln Middle School, English and social studies." Jonathan did not hide his shock. Caleb looked nothing like a teacher now. No tidy classroom, no stack of graded papers, no polished shoes tapping the floors of a school. Instead, a man with the air of quiet dignity was sitting on concrete. "What happened?" Jonathan asked softly. Caleb stared at his hands as if the answers were etched into his palms. "My wife, Nora, she got sick, real sick. Insurance barely covered anything. I took on extra jobs, night shifts, tutoring, whatever I could, but the medical bills just kept piling up. I tried to keep up with everything, but I burned out, lost my job, lost the apartment, even after she passed." His voice broke. "I kept falling." Jonathan felt something in his chest twist painfully. Not sympathy, something deeper, a recognition of loss meeting loss. "I'm sorry," Jonathan whispered. Caleb nodded, but tears didn't fall. His grief had dried into something quieter, something that lived in the tightness of his jaw and the tremor of his voice. "It's fine. Life happens." Jonathan knew that phrase far too well. Life happens. People disappoint. Promises break. He thought of his ex-fiancée, Rachel, telling him she couldn't be with someone emotionally distant while texting someone else behind his back. The sting of betrayal had taught him to expect the worst from people. But Caleb showed him the opposite. "You know," Jonathan said slowly, "you could have taken that wallet. You could have used the money." Caleb let out a tired laugh. "Maybe, but that wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't bring Nora back. It wouldn't make me feel like myself again." Jonathan felt a jolt because in that moment he realized Caleb still cared about who he was, even after everything he had lost. "Can I take you to lunch?" Jonathan asked before he could second-guess it. Caleb shifted, uncomfortable. "I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be." Caleb studied him, searching for motives. Jonathan wasn't sure he understood himself. Eventually, Caleb nodded. "Okay, just someplace simple." Jonathan smiled faintly. "Simple works." As they stood, Jonathan couldn't shake the growing sensation that meeting Caleb wasn't coincidence. There was something binding their stories together. Two men scarred by loss, one buried under wealth and expectations, the other buried under poverty and memories. And neither of them knew that what began as a test was slowly becoming a turning point neither man had expected. Jonathan chose a small diner tucked between a pharmacy and a bookstore, nothing like the exclusive restaurants where he usually held executive meetings. The bell over the door chimed softly as they walked in, and the warm smell of fried eggs and cinnamon toast wrapped around them. Caleb hesitated before stepping inside, as though unsure he belonged in any place with indoor heating and soft lighting. Jonathan noticed and slowed his pace, letting Caleb feel the moment without being rushed. They sat in a booth near the window. A waitress with cheerful eyes brought menus, but Caleb didn't touch his. He stared out the window instead, watching people stroll by with coffees in hand, their lives moving with ease he no longer recognized. Jonathan studied him quietly, noticing how his fingers tapped the table, a rhythm of nerves, of caution, of someone who had learned to expect judgment with every breath. "Order whatever you want," Jonathan said gently. Caleb finally glanced at the menu, cleared his throat, and pointed at pancakes. This is fine." Jonathan smiled. "You can get more than that." But Caleb shook his head with an embarrassed grin. "Haven't had pancakes in months. Kinda missed them." Jonathan felt a tight pull in his chest. Pancakes, something he never thought twice about, felt like luxury to someone who used to shape young minds in a classroom. How thin the line was between stability and falling through the cracks. When the waitress left, Jonathan leaned forward. "Yesterday, when you returned the wallet, you didn't hesitate. Why?" Caleb exhaled slowly. "I didn't want to disappoint myself. Nora used to tell me that integrity is like a mirror. You break it once, you never see yourself the same way again." His voice softened. "I already lost her. I can't lose me too." Jonathan looked down at his water glass, tapping the rim with his thumb. "I wish I'd met someone like Nora." Caleb chuckled lightly. "She was the best part of me. The part that kept me grounded. She believed people were good, even on her worst days." Jonathan stared at him, the words echoing through places in him that had grown dark over the years. He thought of Rachel again, of the night she'd stood in their kitchen with her arms crossed, telling him, "You care more about your company than you do about us." He remembered fighting back, telling her he was doing everything for them, only to realize days later she had moved out and into someone else's arms. Trust had been a fragile glass that shattered before he could catch it. "You miss her," Jonathan said quietly. "Every day," Caleb whispered. "Sometimes I wake up thinking she's still beside me. Then I open my eyes and remember everything I lost." The silence between them grew thick with shared grief. One man grieving the loss of a woman he loved, the other grieving the loss of faith in people. Different pains, but somehow the same ache. The waitress returned with their plates. Caleb's eyes glistened when he saw the pancakes golden and stacked with butter melting down the sides. He muttered a soft, "Thank you," before taking a bite. Jonathan watched the way his shoulders relaxed slightly, as though even a small taste of warmth helped rebuild something invisible. "You know," Caleb said after a few bites, "I used to tell my students that stories are made of turning points. One event can change a character's entire life, if he's paying attention." Jonathan raised a brow. "You think yesterday was a turning point?" Caleb looked at him, really looked. "I think it was for you." Jonathan froze. "Why would you say that?" Caleb shrugged with gentle honesty. "Because you looked lost yesterday. Not financially, emotionally. Like someone searching for something he wasn't sure existed anymore." Jonathan felt exposed, as though Caleb had peeled back the stoic layers he'd guarded so carefully. He swallowed. "You're not wrong." "I figured," Caleb said softly. "People with money sometimes carry the heaviest loneliness." Jonathan leaned back, startled by how true that felt. "You're very perceptive," Caleb smirked. "I'm homeless, not blind. I watch people all day. You learn things." Jonathan wanted to argue, to maintain the protective distance he always kept. But the truth was, Caleb saw him in ways people with perfect suits and corner offices never did. "I didn't lose my faith in humanity easily," Jonathan confessed. It took years, lies, betrayal, people pretending to care. I started thinking everyone wanted something. Caleb nodded slowly. That's a heavy way to live. It is, Jonathan whispered. But you surprised me. You didn't want anything. Caleb looked down, his voice almost too soft to hear. Maybe I wanted to feel like myself again. Returning the wallet, it reminded me I haven't lost everything. Jonathan let those words settle. There was a quiet strength in Caleb that fascinated him, a strength born from pain, not privilege. After they finished eating, Jonathan paid the bill and walked outside with him. The cold breeze brushed against their faces. Caleb shoved his hands into his pockets, suddenly distant again. You okay? Jonathan asked. Caleb nodded but avoided eye contact. I shouldn't get used to this. People don't usually come back. The statement hit Jonathan harder than he expected. I'm not most people. Caleb gave him a pained smile. I appreciate that, but life, it teaches you not to expect too much. Jonathan felt something shift inside him, an unexplainable urge to rewrite that belief, not with pity, not with charity, but with presence. Caleb, he said softly, I'm coming back tomorrow. Caleb looked up sharply, searching his eyes for truth, for sincerity, for something real. Why? He whispered. Jonathan didn't know how to explain the pull he felt toward this man, or why Caleb's honesty mattered more than the polished loyalty of his entire corporation. He only knew one thing for certain. Because yesterday showed me something I didn't know I needed, Jonathan said, and I'm not ready to walk away from it. Caleb stared at him, stunned, as if the world had opened a door he didn't believe existed anymore. Neither man realized that what was forming between them, a fragile trust, was about to change both of their lives in ways more profound, more complicated, and more transformative than either of them could imagine. Jonathan arrived earlier than usual the next morning. He wasn't sure what drove him, guilt, curiosity, or a strange sense of responsibility toward a man whose honesty had softened something rigid in him. Maybe it was all three. The street was quiet, the morning sun stretching across empty sidewalks. For a moment, Jonathan worried Caleb might not show up. Another moment, another unexpected goodbye. But then he saw him coming from the opposite end, walking slowly, shoulders hunched against the wind. Morning, Jonathan called, lifting a hand. Caleb looked surprised, as though convinced Jonathan's promise had been nothing more than polite charity. But there Jonathan stood. Same coat, same quiet presence, waiting. You came back, Caleb said, disbelief lacing his voice. Jonathan smiled softly. Told you I would. Caleb rubbed his hands together for warmth. People say things. Then let me be the one who means them. Caleb lowered his eyes, absorbing those words with the caution of a man who'd learned to trust slowly, or not at all. Jonathan reached into his jacket and pulled out 2 hot coffees. I figured you might need this. Caleb's eyes softened with gratitude. Thank you. They sat on the same curb where they had first spoken. The heat from the cup warmed Caleb's trembling fingers. Jonathan watched him more carefully than he intended. The lines on Caleb's face were deeper today. His breath came shorter. His posture sagged with exhaustion, not just of the body but of life. Jonathan considered asking him when he last had a proper night's sleep, a shower, a doctor's visit, but he held back. Caleb's dignity mattered. You know, I haven't stopped thinking about what you said. Yesterday, Jonathan began. Caleb glanced over. Which part? That stories are turning points. A faint smile lifted the corner of Caleb's mouth. They are. Jonathan nodded slowly. I think you were mine. Caleb's eyes widened, a mixture of confusion and humility. How? I didn't do anything. You did, Jonathan whispered. You reminded me that not everyone wants something from me. You gave me back something I didn't even know I'd lost." Caleb looked down, tears gathering but refusing to fall. "You don't know how long it's been since someone looked at me like I mattered." "You do matter," Jonathan said softly, "more than you realize." For a long while, neither man spoke. The city began waking up around them, cars humming down the street, shopkeepers unlocking doors. Yet it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. At last, Caleb exhaled shakily. "Jonathan, I don't know how to say this, but I can't keep doing this. I'm not okay." Jonathan's heart lurched. "Tell me." Caleb rubbed his face, his voice trembling. "Last night I almost froze. I haven't eaten properly in days. My chest hurts when I breathe. I keep trying to hold on, but—" He shook his head. "I'm tired of being strong, tired of pretending I'm fine, tired of fighting alone." Jonathan felt something powerful surge through him, protectiveness, urgency, and a fierce refusal to let Caleb slip any further. "You're not alone anymore." Caleb blinked, startled. "What?" Jonathan turned fully toward him. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a chance. Come with me. Let me help you get back on your feet. Not because you're helpless, because you deserve more than a sidewalk and a paper cup." Caleb swallowed hard. "Why would you do that for me?" Jonathan thought of his own past, the betrayals, the loneliness, the walls he'd built to protect a heart he pretended didn't hurt. Then he thought of Caleb returning the wallet without hesitation, of the quiet strength in his grief, of the way he still believed in goodness, despite life robbing him of so much. "Because you helped me when you didn't know I needed it," Jonathan said, "and because Nora was right, integrity is a mirror. You helped me see mine again." Caleb's voice cracked. "I don't want to be your project." "You're not," Jonathan said firmly. "You're a human being who deserves a second chance, and I'm someone with the means to offer it. Let me do this. Let me be the person I needed once." Caleb closed his eyes, overwhelmed. When he opened them again, his defenses had softened, replaced by something fragile but hopeful. What would that even look like?" "First," Jonathan said gently, "you're getting a warm bed tonight. Then food, clothes, a doctor's appointment. After that—" He paused as a small smile formed. "We figure out the rest together." Caleb stared at him, breath trembling. "Nobody's offered me a together in a long time." "Well," Jonathan said, "get used to it." For the first time in years, Caleb laughed. Not a tired laugh, not a broken one, but a real, warm, human sound. A sound that cracked open the heaviness in Jonathan's chest. Jonathan stood and offered his hand. Caleb looked at it, hesitation, fear, hope, all swirling in his eyes. Then slowly, he took it. Jonathan pulled him up, steadying him as though the moment itself required gentleness. As they walked toward Jonathan's car, Caleb stopped suddenly and looked back at the spot where he'd spent so many nights. The cardboard sign leaned against the wall, weathered and silent. "You okay?" Jonathan asked. Caleb nodded. "Yeah, just saying goodbye." Jonathan placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Goodbyes are hard." Caleb looked at him. "But maybe this one leads to something better." Jonathan smiled. "It will." When Caleb stepped into the warmth of the car, he paused again. "Jonathan?" "Yeah?" "If you hadn't dropped that wallet—" Jonathan finished the sentence for him. "We wouldn't be here." Caleb nodded. Funny how something small can change everything. Jonathan's expression softened. "Caleb, what you did with that wallet restored my faith in humanity. Now let me help restore yours." Caleb looked down, overwhelmed, then whispered, "Okay." Jonathan started the engine. Together they drove away, not as a billionaire and a beggar, not as a test giver and test passer, but as two human beings both stepping into a new beginning neither expected. a beginning that proved one truth. Sometimes the richest man is the one who gives, and sometimes the strongest man is the one who gets back up.